I mean, I play better, we win. So I mean, I'm just trying to figure it out right now. Obviously, it's frustrating. Never went through a slump like this in my life, but it's all part of it, figuring it out. And yeah, I mean, it sucks. Like, everybody's got the answer, but I mean, it's about me figuring the shit out. So I shall be better, and I will be better moving forward. And if I'm not, we got other people who will be prepared to do it. But I got to be better. That's on me. I mean, I played 32 minutes, more than enough time to do what I do, and I shall be better.
What is up, Pacers Nation? You are listening to the Pacers Post Up, brought to you by the brothers of basketball, Brad and Ryan. A dejected Tyrese Haliburton at the Podium last night. Pacers fall to the Cavs at home 108-103, but that is just the beginning. Tyrese Haliburton in a slump, frankly unlike anything we've seen before from him. Is it injury, fatigue, lineup changes? Is he missing his boy Buddy? And is it time to press the panic button? We're touching on that and more right here on the Pacers Post Up. All right, Pacers fans, we are back here for yet another episode of the Pacers Post Up. Ryan and I were at the game last night against the Cavaliers. We spent some time talking about, we knew we wanted to do a podcast tonight. Mm-hmm. And so originally going into the game, we were talking about, okay, what, maybe some unsung heroes. Do we want to take some time to break some of that down? Guys we haven't talked about. And then the storyline really just kind of unfolded right in front of us. And obviously, we dropped the game to the Cavaliers last night, squandered a 15-point second quarter lead. They tie it up at half, and we really were unable to close down the stretch. And obviously, the storyline here is Tyrese Haliburton. And we've continued to see, just a really... a struggle, a slump, a struggle, whatever you want to call it. We have not seen this from him before. Mm-hmm. And so I think we've got to kind of dive in. It was very telling. I think if anybody was paying attention last night to the post-game press conference, you had your 2 point guards up there and Tyrese and TJ McConnell, and Tyrese looked like a ghost.
Yeah, it was the most dejected I had ever seen, and we talked about this before. He's one of the most joyful players, and just in interviews and podcasts he's done, and in his body language and just the things he said. I mean, I think it's the first time I'd heard him curse in a post-game interview. Yeah. He was out of it, and I don't think he knows exactly how to get out of this slump. It's one of those things where there is no right answer. He even alluded to that in the sense that everybody's got the answer but me. And it's one of those things, we always say you got to keep shooting, but we want to look a little bit deeper, I think, into, what's going on, how we can improve. Now, eventually the shot just has to start falling again.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I listen to some of the local radio guys and you spend any time on Twitter and you get a lot of people that are saying, I'm worried, and here's what I would say to that. I'm concerned, because we're dealing with a lot of different factors here, both from is it fatigue? Is it lingering injury? Is it lineup changes? Mm-hmm. Obviously, the dynamic of the team has changed with some trades, chemistry, things like that. I think what we kind of want to do today is we're not going to sit here and give you an answer. I mean, Tyrese said it. He goes, everybody's got a fucking answer. Well, the point of this is not to give you an answer. It's more to just say, okay, it's probably a combination of a lot of different things, but let's look at it. Mm-hmm. And we got to talk through some of that. So I think... honestly, and it's funny because Ryan and I were exchanging notes before the show, and we both went back, way back to the summer. And I think that's where, if you want to start anywhere, you can start there, because how things have unfolded from August 3rd, let's call it, is kind of interesting, particularly for one guy on our team, and it's Tyrese. So I think we got to start in August and kind of build the narrative from there.
Yep. So I think we'll start. So we had it before. August 3rd is when training camp for FIBA started with the World Cup. It was in Las Vegas. And so it started there. They had 4 exhibition games prior in Vegas. And then I think you had the countries written down that they went.
Vegas. So they started in America. Vegas, Spain, Abu Dhabi, and then into Manila. The Philippines is where the tournament actually was at. So...
And I watched a lot of those games, and it was a lot of travel. And this isn't saying it's a bad thing, because I'm glad Tyrese got this experience, these World Cups. And it was really big because he was really one of the standouts on that team, if you watched it. But as we get into just how long this year has been, this was a start to it, and then you go right into training camp, basically.
Yeah, I looked at it. So it started on August 3rd to 6th was the training camp. Game on the 7th was Vegas. They had a game on the 12th and the 13th of August in Spain. They traveled to Abu Dhabi. There were games on the 18th and the 20th of August. Then they go to Manila for the actual event, and there were games on August 26th, 28th, 30th, September 1st, 3rd, 5th, 8th, 10th.
Yeah.
So I guess we're kind of building this storyline, because that does take you right into damn near training camp.
Yeah. I mean, there's no real break in there.
He's got a week and a half, 2 weeks off before they get into camp on October 3rd. And even though he didn't play in our first couple preseason games, we were on the road. We started preseason October 8th. Yeah. So the point being, Tyrese has been in competitive basketball since August.
Yeah, with no real any sort of substantial break in between.
Yeah, no break. And then the season unfolds. We're playing, and everybody kind of remembers this at the beginning of the year. Carlisle even alluded to it this morning when he was on local radio, talking about our offense. And the word he used was sustainability.
Yeah.
And so we come out of the gate, we're number one in pace, number one in scoring, number one. I mean, you ran down the list going into that in-season tournament. It was like 10 different metrics, and we talked about that in our in-season tournament episode. But the point is, Carlisle called it unsustainable, and I think not only from a stylistic perspective, but from a wear and tear on a player's body, sustaining that pace or that level throughout an 82-game season. I think everybody that's been around the NBA probably knows that's not realistic.
And you can see that with Tyrese. I was looking back just at his game log and trying to see, his ups and downs a bit. And obviously he got to that hot start, the in-season tournament we all remember. But I think he's only had 2 30-point games this year since 2024 started. Wow. And that's just where, if we're going to get ahead of ourselves just a tad, where we're going with this is this could be contributing to these, I don't want to call it dead legs per se, but as you alluded, the wear and tear.
He looks tired.
Yeah, and that's for sure.
He looks tired. I mean,
and how couldn't he be?
Yeah, I mean, last night we're sitting there, and they came out of halftime, and they had
him and Miles.
Miles. They panned the camera to him and put him up on the big screen, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, these guys look like they just saw a ghost in the locker room. And now they came out and hung with them, but they look tired, and that's really where you kind of just this whole thing starts to unfold. We're playing at this pace. Then, obviously, we loved the in-season tournament. Yeah. Right? I mean, it was so cool.
It was good for Tyrese, his overall brand in the NBA, Indiana in general, and we kind of doubled down with it with the All-Star break in Indiana. And so it was all great, and he played well. He showed his skills. And again, so that's what we don't want to say any of this is bad. It's just he's human. And if you think about, and we're going to get to this, this trip where the in-season tournament where they basically were on the road for 2 weeks and didn't have 1 night or 2 nights off for like a month almost.
Yep.
And it's just flights, hotels, days. And all the players are doing this. So it's not just Tyrese, but Tyrese has been going for even longer with the FIBA World Cup. He's got more on his mind with this All-NBA extension potential.
For sure.
And just... he's been on Paul George's podcast 3 times, JJ's 2, minus all the other stuff.
I was going to say, when he was in Vegas,
ESPN, TNT.
We talked about it in Vegas because we were out there. And I'll tell you this, I was fucking exhausted
as
a fan. Just being there and going to all the stuff. And then we got to go home on Sunday.
Yeah.
But he was on both of the the ESPN, the TNT coverages. He did the KG podcast while he was out there, and he was the guy. He was really the face of the in-season tournament. And again, this is not excuse making.
No.
This is just trying to paint a picture for a fan who's sitting there and saying, "Why is my superstar looking like an average Joe?"
Well,
right?
It's one of those things, and a lot of people have been commenting, just, Pacers fans in general, that you alluded to it, the concern, whereas I would put mine more on that short-term concern. I am concerned that his legs are dead, and he's potentially still a little injured, and that this slump might not just be he needs one night and it's over. But for the long term, at some point his legs are going to come back.
Yeah,
he's been a 40% career shooter every year in the NBA from deep. There's not been a year lower. This year it looks like it will be. But so I'm not concerned about that in the long term. But with the way the schedule's set up right now and just being in the last quarter of the season and you lose one game, you drop 2 seeds.
Right.
It's tough.
Well, and that's kind of where, again, we're trying to paint a picture for one guy because this is really just about Tyrese Haliburton.
Yep.
We get, the season starts, we get to the in-season tournament. We know that's awesome. I just got to rattle this off. So you touched on it. We play LA in the championship on Saturday. We have a flight to Detroit on Sunday because we go on a road trip after that.
Yep.
So we have 4 games on the road, the 11th, 13th, 15th, 16th, all on the road. This is December. Come back 18th, 20th, 21st. So you've had 2 back-to-backs in there. Mm-hmm. And then you get 2 days off for Christmas. It's the only stint in the entire month of December from the in-season tournament to when he got injured on January 8th. He had 2 days. It was the only time he had 2 days off in a row.
Yeah.
Christmas Eve, Christmas, which, frankly, if his family's anything like ours, those
not
were
days off.
Those were not days off at all. That was work, I'm sure. So, again, point being, he gets hurt against Boston after a clear, run of a lot of games, a lot of them being on the road there over the holidays. And everything changed at that point, right? Because not only is he dealing with the hamstring, which we know a la James Harden or whoever could be a lingering injury, but we trade for Siakam.
I was going to say, the trade deadline looming.
Yeah.
The team changes basically overnight.
Yeah.
And then he returns because I believe that Trailblazers game that he returned for on the 19th was Siakam's first game.
It was. Mm-hmm. And he's actually talked about, they had kind of, he was ahead of schedule.
Yep.
And the training staff, they had talked about maybe it could have been Sacramento, maybe it could have been Portland. Obviously it wasn't Sac. It ends up we make the trade for Siakam. He's going to start that first game in Portland. And Tyrese admitted that played a role in him wanting to go back.
Yep.
He did not say he was feeling bad. He's like, everything was lining up. But maybe, obviously, hindsight being 2020.
We were on a road trip. I think if that's a normal scenario, he waits to come back and comes back on a home game, gives it that extra 2 to 3 days. But he came in that game, and funny enough, played 34 minutes in that game.
Yeah.
And then starting on, when we returned on the 30th, I think, you started that 20-minute kind of restriction.
And that was weird.
So that's where, if you want to get a little, I don't even want to call it conspiracy theory, the All-NBA, which he needs to make for this extension, which we're going to hit on maybe a little bit later, you have to play 20 minutes a game for those games to qualify.
As to count towards the total.
So maybe there was a wink, hey, we're going to make sure. Now, 20 minutes is not I don't think it's a made-up number for them. If it needed to be 15 to 10, they probably do that. But I do think it was, all right, let's make sure he gets those.
I don't think there's a question about that. And I wonder, too, I mean, you got to think about that. There was a game in there that he didn't start. They were getting funky with I guess what I'm trying to say is he's in a funk. We get that. And if you look at, I pulled the stats I took out the 20-minute games.
Yeah, because those throw everything off.
They threw everything off. But so there's the back from injury games. There were 4 or 5 that were sub 30 games in that 20 minutes restriction. The 16 games since then, the first time he had 30 minutes was on the road in New York, and we beat the Knicks in Madison Square Garden. But he has not been good since then.
No.
I mean, since he's been, so this is a little bit beyond March, but it's 16 games. He's averaging 16 points. Basically, it looks like 10 assists, 4 rebounds, shooting 27% from 3.
Yeah.
We know the numbers in March are even worse.
17%.
But how much does the coming back from the injury, the All-NBA piece, this weird minutes restriction, one game he's not even starting, he just has not been the same. And I don't know. I mean, so there's that. There's the Siakam and the Buddy piece, which I don't know, Ryan. How do you feel? I mean, where are you at with the integration, the loss of Buddy, the integration of Siakam? How much of that do you think is because everybody talked about the fit being so great? are you seeing that, I guess, is what I'm curious.
I'll start with the Buddy loss. I would say I am maybe less than what the fandom feels that it's been as big a deal. Now, I do think that it's mattered, but I was looking just at March even to try to get a feel of the shots he's taking, because it's clear he's in a slump, specifically from three-point line right now, really. Because if you actually look at the numbers in the paint, he's still shooting about relatively the same.
Yeah.
So, and Buddy's great with those ghost screens, and then just his movement. They obviously were close on the court and off the court and knew how to move with each other, but I don't think it's quite as jarring, because if I was looking at March, where he's shooting 17% from deep right now, his three-point attempts are all basically shot selection-wise still the exact same he had prior to the Buddy Hield trade. So if you look at catch-and-shoot attempts with Buddy Hield, 1.8. Now in March, it's at 1.4. Pull-ups were at 5.9. Now at 5.6. You can even look at contested dribbles. I was looking even just his shots on the arc, like percentage-wise, right arc, top of the key. They're all pretty much the same. So I don't want to totally contribute that loss to Buddy. That I know the spacing and all that changes, but I don't think that's the reason why he's shooting 17% from deep in March.
No, I would agree with that. I think there has to be something. I mean, it's a slump. Again, we're not here to give answers.
Now, the shooting slump, I would say that. The fit, obviously, I think there's concerns, and I know you've got some lineups you wanted to get to.
Yeah, and I think, and this is where, when we traded for Pascal, the big thing that we came on this podcast and talked about was, this seemed like a perfect fit.
Yeah.
Right? This is a guy that can do a little bit of everything. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife, good at, averaging 22, 7, and 5.
Plays in transition. The shooting has been better with us than it was in Toronto.
He's shooting almost 40% from deep with us. There has been a lot to like about Siakam's integration, and frankly, the crazy part is Siakam's having a great month.
Yeah.
Tyrese is slumping. Siakam's had a great month. But I do think, if I was concerned about anything, I am less concerned about Tyrese Haliburton long-term being a superstar. I'm more concerned about, we've made this trade for Pascal Siakam. We've shipped Buddy out. And we're doubling down on Benedict Mathurin, right, as a future cornerstone, if you will. And we're probably about to pay Pascal...
That'll be another,
$40 million a year. I mean,
it's going to be very interesting to see the years on that deal, and if it's going to be the full max, if there's going to be maybe some incentives with All-Star and All-NBA in there. We'll talk about that one probably when the offseason comes. But yeah, you obviously want these two to really fit. And this is something I actually just thought of when we were talking. I wonder do you think it might be the Siakam fits off because it's the way they want to play, or do you think it's potentially other people around them? We've talked about that two position. So, like, in theory, if we still had Buddy, would the Buddy, Siakam, Haliburton run work better?
I think it's a good question. I haven't thought about it. My gut would tell me yes. I'm of the mindset. I'll just give you, and we'll kind of talk. I'm going to talk about two different things. I looked at different lineup combinations, okay? And these are all centered around Haliburton lineups. And if you look at three-man combinations, his worst combination, and there's a certain minutes threshold here, but this lineup combination's played 445 minutes. So this is about on average with every other combination in his top 10. The worst is him, Nembhard, and Siakam. And we talked about this maybe an episode or two ago about the original need for Nembhard was defense and a secondary ball handler. That's what Siakam is. And so that's the worst three-man combination that we have, and they're in our starting lineup. And I do think if you were to substitute Buddy for Nembhard, particularly because Siakam was an upgrade on defense, not only... just from versatility standpoint.
But also the fit, moving Neesmith to be able to guard the threes now and sometimes the twos and let Siakam handle the fours has been a huge help.
Correct. And that's, Buddy's still Buddy, and Tyrese is not a great perimeter defender, so you still have two guards that are subpar, I would say. But yes, I do think that lineup from a plus-minus perspective, I think in terms of spacing, shooting, things. Yep. There's an argument to be made. And you can look no further than if I go to the very top of the list, and they've played just this lineup. So the Haliburton, Nembhard, Siakam, 445 minutes, a minus 2.2 rating, plus minus in points. The number one Haliburton three-man combination is Haliburton, Buddy, and Turner. Yep. In 450 minutes, they're a plus 16. So that's an 18-point spread in roughly the same amount of time on the floor. And I understand we were playing a different brand of basketball, but it's a plus minus. So it's still about, are you outperforming the other team? Even if you're giving up points, it's relative to the team that's there. So I think the coaching staff is even recognizing some of this. I've found it very interesting in the last week or so. I don't know if you saw this last night. We're at 4 minutes left in the game. Siakam is still not in.
Yeah.
He's still not in. And they came out of a timeout, Ryan, with 3 minutes left, and Obi walked out.
Yeah.
Carlisle noticed that Cleveland had made a substitution, and then he brought Siakam in.
Yeah.
So
And Siakam had been our best player that game in the casket.
Right. He had like 19 and 11, 19 and 10. I mean, he was the go-to guy, but Siakam is getting more run with the second unit. And if you look at, if you just look at Tyrese Haliburton's two-man combinations, it's actually Bruce Brown, number one, Buddy's number two. They're both at basically 7.5 plus positive in the plus-minus. His third one, Obi Toppin.
Yeah.
And then it's Turner, Nesmith. So I think there is clear chemistry stylistically that Tyrese has with a guy like Obi. I just don't know if we're seeing it with Siakam yet. And I guess the numbers are telling me we're not. Siakam looks way better with the second unit.
Well, it's definitely Tyrese. We know this. Likes to play fast. I gave you the fun stat last where he's averaging like 77 passes a game or something. So always trying to move the ball, get everybody involved. And this isn't in a bad sense, but we see a lot now Siakam working in that mid post where he's basically isolated on one side or the wing, and it's going to work. And I don't know if Tyrese has ever played with somebody. Even in Sacramento, they didn't have somebody who was ever doing that. And so it's got to be a little new for him. I will say if there's a saving grace with those numbers, it's unfortunate that Siakam has played when Tyrese has been in this slump.
Yeah.
So those numbers are obviously going to take a hit just based on Tyrese's play alone.
Yeah. I guess it's, is it the chicken or the egg? Yeah. That's what I'm trying to get at. And I don't know. It could just be... Because if you look down the line, and I'm gonna move on from these stats, but Siakam finds himself, frankly, from a Turner perspective, in every single one. Whether it's he's dead last in the two-man combinations, he's 9th and 10th in the three-man, he's 9th and 10th in the four-man, and there's a couple that the five-man combinations pull in rotations that have 30 minutes on the season. So those aren't fair, but. He's in 6th and 7th, and those are the only ones that have any real meaningful minutes together. So I kind of threw those numbers out. But yeah, is it the chicken or the egg? Are we? I saw something last night where Tyrese. This was at the end of the game. Maybe you remember this. Tyrese gets the switch. Siakam. They run the pick. They get the switch to the small on Siakam.
That was Karis LeVert on Siakam,
and Niang's on Tyrese, and Tyrese pulls from 35 feet.
Yeah, and this is one of those where. You have to shoot to get out of a slump. Although if you're 1 of 7 at that point, it's probably, in crunch time. I think we were down 2 at that moment. That's where you got to feed Siakam.
Do you think he's forcing it?
It's hard to say because I don't hate most of the threes. He's taken a few of those large step backs but he hits those sometimes. Yeah. You mentioned it, it's the All-Star game, whatever, but he was hitting threes that were 5-10 feet behind the line and started out 5 of 5. I think he can't stop shooting. I do think there's a little bit where, 1 of 9 back-to-back games, maybe you calm it down, especially when we need these wins. They're so important. But I mean, eventually this comes out of this slump. He needs to maybe call Chubbs and find his happy place again.
Right.
I don't really, again, that's not even, this is why I'm not giving advice how to do that. I have no idea. We've all been on like a golf course where somebody's all of a sudden trying to fix your swing in it.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, shut the fuck up.
Yeah. That's it. Yes, 100%.
So we're not doing that with Tyrese. Eventually, water's going to find itself. But yeah, I do think he's definitely visibly frustrated out there and wants it to end really bad, as anybody would.
Yeah.
So maybe there are times where he would, in that situation, distribute, get more people involved, and he's like, I need this. And if you're in Bankers or Gainbridge Fieldhouse, you can feel this sometimes where the crowd is almost like, come on, Ty, come on, we need this.
Yeah. I think he's in a tough spot because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, in the sense of, if you just stop shooting, then now you're giving the defense an out, right? And if you do make sure you're getting your number of shots, or he should be shooting 15 shots a game as our quote unquote leading scorer, best player. But I think what you hit on is exactly how I felt. He looks visibly frustrated, and understandably so. But he's playing frustrated, and it's like, every time he misses a shot, you see him like put his hands on his head and kind of shake his head like, oh my God, seriously? And that's where we're just so far removed from skipping down the sideline, versus Atlanta or whoever.
That joy we talk about, that it feels like we haven't seen that, and it's tough, obviously, when you're in the slump that he is, but that effort where he's making no-look passes and he's running down. It's like you said, he's skipping and he's jawing, and he's still doing some of that. He had a nice no-look to Obi last night, but it's still just, his energy's off. I think I don't want to say it's affecting the team, because we could almost say TJ's stepped up since that time, and he just needs to, and it's, as we've kind of said, he's probably run down from this whole year. There's that lingering injury, maybe. I would think that it's probably still bothering him more than he'll lead on. And I like players that aren't making excuses. Everybody's beat up at this point of the season. But, with those two things, and then the lingering pressure of $40 million of All-NBA, that's a lot to handle.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Kevin Bowen this morning asked Rick Carlisle, he does a Tuesday morning bit with the wake-up call, and he asked him, he goes, is there any thought to sitting Tyrese? And Rick kind of goes, he's not injured.
Yeah.
He's not injured. And fair enough, but you hit on it. I think part of that, too, is he doesn't have any ability to sit, particularly with this contract situation. So not only, we went down it, and I'll just go kind of, I think this is the right time to do this because I made a short list. FIBA in the summer, in-season tournament, no days off on All-Star Weekend. We didn't really spend. We have a whole
not a break, not an All-Star break.
No, we had a whole episode on that where he was. I mean, that was 24/7. Guy couldn't have been sleeping more than 5 hours a night, maybe. He gets the injury. He's working back. Buddy's out the door. They're integrating Siakam, and he's playing for $50 million. Yeah, right. And so. You talked about what is the stat on number of games left?
So he can only miss 4 more games. So that's where, if maybe it would help if he could have a few rest games, but you can't even really give him 1 or 2 because then you're a tweaked ankle, a tweaked wrist away from not even being qualified. And we can even say, so if you don't know exactly, I wrote this down just to give a little bit. So the exact contract he would get if he didn't make All-NBA is $204.5 million. If he makes All-NBA, it goes up to $245 million.
Okay.
So it's about a $40 million increase. And if you look at the All-NBA and how it works, it's a media-voted thing, literally. So, like, some of the names are like Chris Broussard, Doris Burke, Mike Greenberg, Kevin O'Connor, J.J. Redick, Bill Simmons. These were all guys who voted last year on this. So if I were to say, and we were talking about this a little bit before, there's like 8 locks if you go down the list. I'm not going to do it right now, who are pretty much guaranteed. It's like Joker, Giannis, these guys.
Tatum,
Then there's this mix of like Booker, Mitchell, Domas, AD and LeBron, Brunson, Edwards, and Tyrese. And we talked about it a little bit. It has to be on his mind. I mean, that this is looming.
For sure. I don't care if you just signed a $204 million contract. $40 million is $40 million.
It's a 30% increase. So just picture your job, and if your boss came in and said, hey, if you hit these numbers, I'll give you a 30% bonus. You'd be like, all right, we're hitting these numbers.
Right. No question about it. And so does that add to, I think, again, it's a combination of all this shit.
That's I think what we're trying to hint at is it's so much going on top of he's worn down, and there's just, he's frustrated.
Yeah. I mean, you saw, I would say last night was sort of the epitome or the pinnacle of where you could see his frustration. There's about 2 minutes left in the half.
Yeah.
And Tyrese gets pulled, which you just don't see.
I don't think that's happened in his tenure ever. Even if it's just an end of a half, I don't think I've seen him ever pulled like that.
And he walked straight to the locker room.
Oh, yeah, dead. I mean, no, and I said it right as he was walking. I was like, he will not stop on the bench. And he immediately was dead.
Yeah. There was some reports on Twitter that maybe he was on the bike. I saw him walk down the tunnel.
He was gone. I watched Jalen on the bike. He was not there.
And we had a pretty good angle from our seats looking right down that player tunnel. So he gets pulled, and then you're almost, and we've talked about this. This goes for any player. You're 1 or 2, 3 shots away from this slump being over.
Yeah.
I mean, you see a couple in a row
Ben
go in.
Shepherd went 5 of 5 that one game and is shooting like 38% or something since then.
Yeah, it just takes, it can flip like a switch.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it's going to take. So he's going to have to keep shooting, whether that means he forces the issue or not. Hell, we're playing Detroit tomorrow night, so force it against the worst team in the league. I mean, you might as well take a bunch of shots and try and figure this out. But from a coaching perspective, I do think some of this is on the coaching staff to figure out how to get him easy looks.
Yeah.
To get him going, frankly, early inside the paint, because finishing at the rim and his mid-range jumper has actually looked great.
His mid-range looked good. He's brought back kind of that baby hook in the paint.
Yep.
And he's taken some hits even in there. We saw that he had a couple and ones last night, or at least the one I saw where he took it and put it off the glass. But yeah, he's got to find ways. And the good news is he's still getting people involved. We've seen him play a little bit more with Obi, I think, as Siakam runs with the second unit.
Yep.
And Obi and him have a real nice synergy because Obi is just always gunning down the floor. He's not taking a ton of dribbles or working in the post.
Yeah. And I think, so going into, just as a sidebar, going into this last night, we were going to talk about Obi going into today, because this is a guy that's played himself onto next year's roster.
Has to be.
In my opinion. And this doesn't have anything to do, well, it does kind of have to do with Tyrese in the sense that he is a clear fit. He's a clear fit with the style. Rick is getting him time with Tyrese intentionally because they're so dynamic.
Yeah.
And I think, just in the purposes of this episode, I think we'll probably punt that down the road.
Yeah, it's not the story today.
And talk about Obi and some of the other unsung heroes. But, I at the end of the day, it comes down to we're on the hook with Tyrese. Yeah. And I understand fans living in the moment and wanting to crucify him or say, what the hell? You've got guys like Anthony Edwards and Brunson going off for 40. And and Tyrese is always going to be compared to those guys, from the FIBA. Yeah. Frankly, they've been FIBA as well. So this is not about excuse making. It's just more painting the picture of, okay, this guy's been playing competitive basketball since August.
And he set the bar high. I think that's also part of it. When he was, I think he was averaging close to 26 for the first
and 12 or 13.
Yeah, and it was, and again, that's where Rick talked about how it wasn't sustainable. And really, even there's another hint, and we'll not get into this too much. If you look at the post All-Star break, there might have been a wink with Adam Silver and the refs to be like, hey, we got to stop that week where, Embiid and Booker all had like 60 points in Luka. There was like, hey, we need to, and I only have really been following this because a lot of the unders in NBA games have been hitting. But it's just, that's not the excuse, because I don't think that's the reason why Tyrese has not been. It's not like, because he doesn't depend on whistles, and, maybe players are playing him a little bit more physical, but he's so shifty and movey where maybe that's the hamstrings playing a little part. But
I think it is, and I think you hit on something too. The physicality, the zone has given us problems.
Yep.
Cleveland went to a zone last night. I think the way teams are defending him, and again, I if you're Carla, I guess I got to ask this, because I am ready to bench Andrew Nembhard.
Yeah.
Period. So Do you make a change? Do you make a lineup change to try and get some sort of different rhythm to get Tyrese going?
Yeah, I guess the one fear I would play on that one is we've changed lineups so much. We even talked about how that's been one of the things that just takes a lot of time to get going, that doing that one more time, I would say if you wanted to do it, let's get it going now so that group can grow. I think I know where your head is at, and I agree with the future. Maybe Shepherd is kind of that answer there in terms of he has a little bit more of that movement shooter to him, can play off Tyrese, still has the defense to hopefully guard that other, guard where Nesmith will take the three. I probably am just riding this out. Maybe, and again, I'm actually glad we have a disagreement here because
I just disagree.
Usually we agree so much but I do agree that Nembhard's fit with him. Nembhard's offense really in our system right now is corner threes, I guess, occasionally. And he's got that where he catches it kind of on the right side, goes in with his left, lowers his shoulder. He's got a sweet spot, but on that left elbow. But yeah, I don't know. Are you talking Shepherd potentially?
Here's what it comes down to for me, because Nembhard has clearly been one of our top defenders alongside Nesmith. We know that. I think the world of Nembhard from that perspective. My eyes are telling me when I watch the game that the ball sticks with Nembhard. He not a Matherin type of stick, but the ball sticks, and frankly, it's because at his best, when Tyrese was out, he was dribble penetration.
Well, say he's a point guard in that sense. Now he's not as gifted as Tyrese in that way, but he does. We've seen those in games, exactly what you said, and even when he was leading the bench unit at the beginning of the year, he definitely is that way. I guess my concern then with moving him to the bench is, are we just going to see the same issue now with him and TJ? Because he's basically the same role again.
Yeah, no question about it.
Yeah.
And I guess at this point, I would rather have the issue be with TJ than with Tyrese. And I think if you're this coaching staff, you have to look at what can we. Carlisle said this morning, and I don't mean to keep going back to this, but he talked about two things: men, not machines, right? So you can look at all the numbers and they'll tell you certain things, but you have to watch what's going on with your own eyes. And then he says, I'm not watching other games. We understand where we're at in the seeding, and we're not talking about that here today. But he said that in the context of we have to control what we can control. And I guess if I'm on that coaching staff and this is just an eye test thing, Tyrese benefited from Buddy's movement. Ben Shepherd is not Buddy Hield. No. I pulled some stats. Buddy had 288 threes last year. It was a franchise record. He was second in the league and like ninth in three-point percentage. All-timer. But Nembhard was put in the lineup for his defense and secondary ball handling. We've talked about it. Siakam is the secondary ball handler. And frankly, some of the plays where Siakam has initiated the offense have been some of Tyrese's best outcomes. Just kind of anecdotally. But I think now if you bring somebody in who's going to make quicker decisions with the ball, it keeps the offense moving. And that to me is what Tyrese thrives in, because that's where he gets his pocket passes, the no look, the lobs to whoever. I just think yes, I disagree with you. I think that it's worth taking a flyer because we have changed the lineup so much.
You're definitely right there. And to even play devil's advocate on my own point, it's that this, not even just Tyrese's slump, but this post All-Star offensive slump, we'll call it. It's not been horrible, but it's obviously not been. And we need this team to be in the top 5, really, if we're going to be successful the way we want to be. It's been long enough where you probably do have enough evidence that maybe it is worth a try shifting those two guys. And because I don't think you're moving Nesmith or Siakam or Turner, obviously. Those guys are locked in. They've proven fit. And Nesmith has really come back on since his injury in the last 5 games, really. So I guess you've almost talked me into it a little bit. I do like Nembhard's defense, especially this post-All-Star break. We've done a better job. If you remember on our previous podcast, I talked about shutting down stars, and we've done a much better job of keeping them closer, or even like we saw with Mikal, where I know Nesmith was really getting a lot of that under their averages, which has been nice to see. But Maybe it is time.
Listen, I'm just going to give you this stat right here. So, and I didn't even circle this for this conversation, but I knew I had it in front of me. 246 minutes, Haliburton, Nembhard, Nesmith, Siakam, Turner. That lineup has played together.
How many?
246 minutes.
It's more than I would have thought.
That they've played together. They are a minus 3.4. Okay. So that of the 5-man combinations, they are, well, I'll just give you this lineup. They've played 246. The only other minute that I have highlighted that would qualify is a lineup that played 170 minutes together. Tyrese, Hield, Bruce Brown, Obi, Turner, plus 18.
Okay.
There's a 21-point spread. I think some of this, and this is just me with the eye test, I see Tyrese struggling in a slower game. We've seen it. Our defense has actually been better over the last couple of games.
In March, we're league average right now. We're 16th in defensive rating through, and we're like 15th in offensive rating through. With a Tyrese slump, might actually be slightly encouraging. But
we've had it. The Orlando game was a sub 100. The Nets game could have been a sub 100. Even in the loss last night, it's 108.
Oh yeah,
Wolves game's 113. I just, you look at a couple of the raw numbers since the break, and I've got it somewhere here in front of me. The 3-point numbers. Post All-Star, we are dead last in the league. And that's what Tyrese, and that's just, I mean, he's
in February, he was still shooting 38%, I believe, from deep. So his that slump, even though he still looked off through that, it's not been specifically that. So that is even more discouraging.
And our attempts are down, too. Yeah. I guess that's what I'm getting at. We're shooting 3 less a game.
Nembhard takes about 2 and makes 1 a game, roughly. Yeah. I mean,
I guess I am of the mindset that you have to put pressure on the defense to come out to you and guard that 3-point line. It's going to create driving lanes. It's going to open things up. Now, I know a lot of the zone negates some of that because guys aren't chasing as much, but it's, I don't know. I've got off on a tangent here, but I think as a coaching staff, the bottom line is you got to help your guy out. And right now, this just isn't working. And so...
And look, if anybody's hesitant, you don't want to start a rookie, especially maybe a later round draft pick. Well, we did that all last year with Nembhard, who was, a second rounder, basically picked in a similar range as Shepherd. And obviously, we like Shepherd's defense. I don't know if it's quite to the Nembhard level yet, but if you're willing to give up a little, and if Nembhard or Shepherd's shooting and movement can help get Tyrese going, then I don't see why you wouldn't at least consider it.
It's something we got to look at. Well, so, I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to find out here because we got 5 games on the road. So what are you looking for out of these next 5? Where do you think we have any life?
I guess for me, I would almost go, I want to see, I'm going to struggle, the fun Pacers back. Where everybody's, and again, I know that comes with winning and hitting shots, so I don't want to just bail that out. But I want to see them come out, and maybe Tyrese, if you miss, just, keep going. Don't let it eat you alive. Again, I don't want to do that because that's exactly what he didn't want to hear. But I want to see us come out, be aggressive, still play our style of offense, maybe try to get a little bit more of that pace back up, get running. That's where Obi, even Siakam, get him in transition a bit would be helpful. And, I mean, what is it? How many games is it? A 6-game road?
5-game trip. So it's Detroit, then it's out west for 3, Clippers, Lakers, Warriors, not in that order. I don't know. Yeah. And then we close with Chicago.
So 2 easier ones. That other, the Clippers, Lakers, Warriors. The Clippers are, I think, at the 4 seed right now and still buying for that, 5-6 range. And then the, Lakers and Warriors are in that 9-10 spot right now. So they're going to be giving it everything they have. So the nice thing with that is I know the Lakers defense has been, pretty bad post All-Star break. I think they're in the bottom 25 range or something like that. So, with them in Detroit, maybe you can get a little of that going with those 2 teams. Although don't sleep on Detroit. They're not the worst team in the league.
They've been trending.
Yeah.
They really have. And I think for me, I want to see them, and I'm getting on my own horse here. I want to see them get Turner involved early. I want to get Tyrese a couple of early assists, get Miles at the top of the key. I know that, again, defenses are playing different coverages. If they're blitzing, it can affect how easy that pass is to get into the middle, etc. But I just think if you look at the games where that combination gets going early, it seems to set the tone. Now, that's looking at the numbers, but even the eye test, we've talked about it last night. Miles is one of the best shooters from the mid-range and has been his entire career.
100%.
And this franchise has tried to do all kinds of different things with him, from put him in the post back to the basket to make him shoot threes in the corner. I mean, and he can do that to a degree. He's having a good shooting season. He's most effective in the top of the key and letting him work. And I think it's early assists for Tyrese. They're still the top duo in terms of assists in the league, those two. They're just ahead of Trae Young and I forget who it is on Atlanta. But I just think you got to try, and I know so much of what we do schematically is kind of random. You know, that's what they call our style of play. I just think you got to try and do something to get a little mojo going.
And you hit on it even with Miles. We know Miles is an emotional player.
For sure.
Even just, we've watched him really grow up with this, and I don't want to even say struggle, but, you know, with that confidence builder. And getting him going, we see those where he can have a 20-point half, and then all of a sudden he's got 5 blocks. And, I mean, he was crushed on the glass last night, which is kind of his MO. But, yeah, I'm with you where it gets him going, and then even when Tyrese was really, getting those high scoring games, it did feel like he always liked to start getting everybody else going first, which sometimes is the best idea when nobody can get going. That's maybe where he needs to get a little bit more aggressive at times. But I'm with you. If you can come out, get Miles a couple easy, get Tyrese on the assist, and then pray to God one of the threes falls early, and then.
Well, we're a couple shots away from this thing being all over.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't say I'm worried, I'm concerned, just in the sense that we're right now sitting in a play-in spot. We've got a 5-game road trip, which is never great.
Yeah.
And you talk about Turner, he's going to have to see Anthony Davis again. He's going to have to see Zubac, which is, there's a couple.
Jalen Duren's big.
Duren's been a problem for him. So there's a couple bad matchups, I think, for us. Clippers blew us out.
Yeah.
Obviously, we know what happened in the in-season tournament. Hopefully, we will figure out maybe a different coverage with DeRozan in Chicago.
Yeah.
And Golden State right now they're kind of like us. They're a little Jekyll and Hyde.
They're going back and forth.
Yeah.
One day it's like, oh, they figured it out. And the next game it's,
Draymond's laying on the ground for 4 possessions. Did you see that?
I didn't see the Draymond.
Oh, my God. He went down.
Oh, I did, actually.
He went down on... So I got to paint this picture. Go look at it if you haven't, whoever's listening to this. He's down on the ground. Okay, they go down. Paul George misses a 3 on the other end. They come back down in transition for a Kuminga dunk.
Yeah.
Draymond's still on the ground in the middle of the paint. And then they inbound it, and Clay kind of looks at him, and he's still there, and the clip cut. So I don't know how long he was. Draymond Green is unbelievable.
These guys. It was a pretty entertaining, actually, from a comedy standpoint this week in the NBA. DeAndre Ayton had some wild statements about sleeping on an air mattress. I don't know how much sympathy I get from a $160 million player and can't quite figure that out. Meanwhile, I don't make shit, and I've got 2 extra in my house at this moment.
Right.
And then there was a funny jersey swap between a couple rookies that, if you're interested, you can go look up. But there were a couple funny storylines.
Raptors Magic.
Yeah.
That's where you need to look for that one. I'm not going to air it out here on the broadcast. But here, listen, guys, we'll bring this thing in for a landing. The bottom line is Tyrese Haliburton is the future of this franchise. None of that has changed here in the last, let's call it, 15 games.
Nope, we're worried about the short term, but he is still our 1A going forward. And I have no doubts that there will be a time where you could even clip this and be like, oh, remember when Tyrese was ice cold? Those days are gone.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. The short-term concern is, does it happen quick enough this year to get us back on track?
Yeah.
Or do we play ourselves out of playoff positioning, and that's going to be a whole different conversation that... Frankly, I hope we don't have to have.
Yeah.
But if we do, we will at the time. So appreciate you guys listening. We'll come back at you here on the road trip. Maybe dive into some of the unsung heroes, a la T.J. McConnell, Obi Toppin, etc. Pay attention to lineups. Does Jarris Walker get any more run? We didn't see him last night. A lot to look forward to. Hopefully the slump ends here over the next 5.